Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Is everybody surviving the conference is good. Are you surviving the evening? A few people look a little tired, maybe a little partying last night. That's reassuring. Yeah, that's part of the ambience of Atlanta, though. You know? Yeah. So thanks for joining us. Basically, we're going to talk about the Salesforce1 Platform. And the goal is basically not to cover everything in Salesforce. It's quite a monster. But we're going to talk through some of the basics and kind of show you how you can do some things. And I'm going to do a live code demo, and I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to hope I don't break anything. And we'll see how it goes. So a quick intro to who I am and what we are. So I run a company called Bluetube with a wonderful team of really smart people, much smarter than me. And we build enterprise mobile applications. And really our strength is that we understand the user experience, we understand very complex technologies, and we kind of bring those two together. I'm sure you guys have worked with folks where they're good at code but not good at the pretty stuff. We tend to be good at both. And we're also a Xamarin consulting partner. We've done it for quite a long time. We've been through the good and the bad and experienced a lot of things. And some of the apps we built that you could actually see out there. So we built an app called for Cito, which is a boating company. It's kind of like AAA, but for boats. So your boat runs aground, you swipe, they come rescue you, and they tell you all kinds of other interesting things along the way. And then we've also built their web technologies. We've done stuff for Kimberly-Clark. But mainly enterprise, we do a little bit of consumer apps. And I have no idea how this slide got in my deck. Somehow it magically appeared. But the Kimberly-Clark Apex app is up for a vote. And should you feel inclined, feel free to visit this website. And if you guys could lock the door so everybody votes before they leave, just click on that and vote for us. So we're hoping for the Enterprise Award. So Salesforce1, the enterprise backend. So what we're going to talk about is a lot of times we have to build backend technologies, right? When what we're trying to do is database functionality and services and things that are kind of not the most exciting thing in the world to build. And we have to kind of do a lot of work to put that together. So what my talk's going to cover is I'm going to demo an app. I'm going to talk about the front end, which is built in Xamarin. And my focus really is how do you get the data into a Xamarin app and how do you get it back out to Salesforce. The code isn't pretty, the UI isn't pretty, it's not designed to be showing off Xamarin. It's really showing off how do you get it in and out. I'm going to talk about the Salesforce1 Platform, what it is, and authentication, the databases, stuff like that. And then we're going to talk about how I created the app. I'm going to change it, and then I'll leave some time at the end if you guys have any questions. So Salesforce1, so I was a little confused actually when the brand came out. It's a platform, so it's not a new invention, it's basically a platform, and it's made up of Heroku, ExactTarget, Fuel, and Force.com. And there is also a Salesforce1 app, just to confuse us a little bit. So if you install the app, you get an app called Salesforce1. There's also a platform API where you can integrate with Salesforce, and then there's also an administration system. But think of Salesforce1 as an umbrella for all the offerings from Salesforce rather than a single product. So talking through, we're going to really focus on Force.com, which is their API and how we integrate, but I'm going to touch on a couple of other things that Salesforce have in case folks don't know about it. ExactTarget Fuel is one of their platforms. It's a multi-channel marketing engine. You can create personalized contents based on user behavior that you can then deliver to all types of devices, so you can capture that information and deliver it. It's got analytics reporting, it's got social integration, it does ads, it can be API driven or user interface driven, and it's basically powered by Fuel UX. And there's also a cloud-based editor where non-technical people can put marketing strategies together. I'm not an expert in this by any means, I've just kind of read the cliff notes, but just wanted to let you guys know that that's in the platform, so if you have a membership, you get it. I think I skipped one. So Heroku is something that Salesforce acquired, and it's a polyglot cloud platform, and I had to go Google what polyglot is. But basically, you can program in multiple languages, and you can use the language that you see is the best fit for the task you're trying to solve. So you can code in Ruby, you can code in Node, you can do Java, you can do Python and Django, and you can also use Clojure and Scala. So You can basically choose which bit am I trying to build and which is the best language for that. So I'm passing text, I'm talking to databases, what is that I'm doing, what shall I use? And it also integrates with Postgres or Mongo. And it's got bidirectional sync to Salesforce, so anything you do in your database, you can sync back to Salesforce very easily. So most of what we're going to talk about is Force.com. So what is Force.com? It's basically designed API first. So it's all kinds of other tools. But as they built and designed Force.com, they designed the API, and then they designed the tools, because they wanted all the tools to integrate, and they wanted a flexible platform that anybody could then use via the API and not use Salesforce's user interfaces if they didn't want to. It's got a mobile SDK, so you can basically talk to it from multiple mobile platforms, Xamarin included. There's a web user interface system called Force, Visual Force, where you can actually build web pages and administration systems all on Salesforce without really having to do major coding, and they'll host it in Salesforce for you. So you could put, for example, if you said, hey, I want an employee system to request time off, you could build it all on Force.com with no web server needs or really any solid programming required. It is programmatic, so anything you can't do through the visual editors, you can add code. And they have a language called Apex that's an object-oriented language. It looks very much like C#. It's really easy to learn. And you can basically use that for any heavy lifting or anything that's extra complex that the user interface and admin systems don't provide. And then it's got social integration. So they have a feature in Salesforce called Chatter, and you can basically publish to the Chatter API and make all your employees aware, or Salesforce or managers or whoever you want to talk to. And then it also provides multi-tenant authentication, delegated authentication, so you can lock down things at different levels as you see fit. The authentication typically would be overkill for anybody in terms of the features they provide. So why would we use it? Why would we even look at it? So there's a few kind of use cases why you might look at this. So you might have existing apps, so your company owns Salesforce, you got apps, and you would like to make them mobile. So you've got all this great data. And a lot of people see Salesforce as just a CRM. And what I'm going to show you is not just a CRM. CRM being I've got accounts, I've got opportunities, I've got clients, and I need to follow up on them. It's basically a really nice user interface over a database and a set of APIs that you can control and design. So imagine the administration systems used for SQL. It's kind of like something like that, but a lot more powerful. You can enable access anywhere to any employee. You can build the app. You can use the Salesforce1 app, or you can use a web interface. You can also analyze all the data that people are doing with the platform. Where are they doing it? How are they doing it? What device are they doing it on? So all your analytics are built in. You can reduce back-end code. So for some of the repetitive stuff that really isn't the best use of your time, you can actually do in Salesforce1. And it basically makes some of the tedious stuff that you're like, hey, yeah, sure, we're developers and we do cool stuff, but some of it's tedious, some of it's not exciting, so how do I get the tedious stuff off my plate and able to put it in another platform? And then finally, it's really easy to make changes on the fly. So if you want to change data in the system and you want to expose it to your app, it's very quick, and hopefully it'll be just as quick when I demo it and don't break anything. So I'm going to show you the pitch because they have a really nice video of what Salesforce.com is. It's a bit glamorous and a bit Hollywood, but if I get this thing to play, hold on a sec.
The third great wave of computing is upon us.
Just to mess with you. Thank you.
An era of hyperconnection. Billions of people.
Let's see. Yeah, my Mac decided to stop mirroring. Let's try that. That's what broke it.
The third great wave of computing is upon us. An era of hyperconnection. Billions of people and things and devices connecting faster than ever. But behind all the technology, behind every connection, every app, and every device is the single most important element of all. A customer. Billions of them. each armed with the ability to make choices and decisions at superhuman speed. Welcome to the Internet of Customers. The most powerful wave of the Internet revolution is happening now, today, right at this very moment. Your customers are racing into the future and determining the future of your company. And it all comes down to this. You need to get to the future first, ahead of your customers, and be ready to greet them when they arrive. Introducing Salesforce1, an all-new platform engineered to connect customers to the next generation of apps and devices, so you can sell, service, and market like never before. A customer platform designed entirely to accelerate development and deployment in a mobile-first world, with social collaboration at its core and 100% Salesforce Cloud. So you're not only ready for what's next, you're way out in front, ahead of next. Here you'll find APIs for anything, so you can connect with everything. A world-class mobile app exchange, so you're instantly ready to build and sell next-generation apps for the enterprise app revolution. Plus, a new admin app, so you can quickly change things on the fly. This is where one button instantly connects everything. Your customers, your employees, your partners, your products. Everything you've ever created on Salesforce, and everything yet to come. It's the Salesforce you know and love, only better. Suddenly, opportunities are everywhere, along with the ability to service customers at the speed of now. Connect one-to-one like never before, and turn consumers into customers. Create anything you can dream up with the fastest path from idea to finished app. No hardware, no software, no speed limit. Absolutely nothing in the way of our commitment and number one goal, to be the company that helps you and every single company connect to your customers in a whole new way. This is the new Salesforce. This is Salesforce1.
All right, that's it. I'm out. I'm good. Okay. So we're going to do a quick demo of an app that I built. And like I said, it's not pretty, but it's a good exercise to show you things. And I was kind of complaining to the team a little bit. When you build a demo, and especially when you're talking to a back-end system, you got authentication, you got data binding, you got all this, you kind of want to break it up into lots of classes and frameworks, but then it's really hard to explain in a presentation. So it's kind of all kind of mushed into one place, so don't pick on my code, basically, is what I'm saying. So we'll go over to the app and take a look. Let's see if it stops switching screens. Let's see. Okay, I'll just give up. Okay, so we have a very complicated app here. Basically, anybody using Salesforce knows there's an idea of contacts and opportunities, and let's ignore that for a minute. I've created basically a set of targets, which are, you're at a conference, right? You meet people along the way. You decide you'd like to talk to them later, and you might capture information about it and you're interested in them, and you're doing it in your mobile app. So we've got a number of targets here. We got Cookie Monster, and he basically wants a diet app, and he's got quite a nice budget for that app. And we've also got Mr. Magoo, who apparently needs a speech impediment app. Goes through that, and you can basically change any of this stuff. So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to add a new one. So we'll call this, is there anybody here who isn't a developer? That is maybe a manager? You? Lady at the back. So could I have your name? Do you mind? Yeah? Terry. So we'll put in Terry. So what's a project you're working on right now? Okay. So we'll call it Account Discovery App, just to keep it simple. And we'll just make up a budget. It's a really big budget.
Bring in the revenue.
Okay. Should have disabled my breakpoints. Well, at least it's real code. Okay, so Terry is in there with all this stuff. Okay, so let's have a look and see what happened. So basically, the app, obviously is pretty simple and what it does. Now let's go and look at Salesforce. And log in. Oops. Typing backwards is kind of hard. Okay, so this is basically the Salesforce admin interface. If anybody's used to it, this will look familiar. It isn't the sexiest user interface in the world, but it does the job. And basically, this is my landing page. So what we're going to go look at and see, so Terry was kind enough to give me some info. We put it in an app. Let's see what happened. Let's see if it went anywhere. So I'm going to go to targets. And I see a new target called Terry. And if I look in there, I haven't assigned a photo because I didn't have time to build it into my app. But it gives me a little info. Now if I go look at projects, okay, there's an account discovery app here. And it's got a budget, and right now it's assuming the platform is iOS. And look, there's a new lead been generated that has been assigned to me to follow up with Terry. And all that back-end stuff we just did was done with no code. So let's walk through a little bit about how that was done. Come on. So we'll look through the interface of Salesforce. So basically, we need a place to put our data and configure it, and then see how it looks and create relationships. So we're going to go look at the object browser, which is basically like a user interface for defining tables and database components. And we can see here I've got a few. So I created a target, and I basically had that, it's got some fields, it's got an image, it's got a thumbnail and photo, which is a way for me to manipulate this so I can preview it in Salesforce. And if we scroll down here, there's also basically all the setup of the application. So if I now go over to projects, which I created, the one that we talked about is also a custom object. So let's go into setup again. Let's go down to objects. And let's look at project. And we see there's some additional fields. So there's a budget field, a platform field, and a target field. And we notice that it says pick list, so we can set up all our settings and pick lists in Salesforce again without having to write any code. And one of the things that the platform did was it created an event to tell me to follow up on it, right? So that creates an email, it creates a task, it creates a reminder, and it'll bug me about it. So how do we make it do that? Basically, that's part of workflow. So if we go into workflow, and we look at workflow rules, I create a rule called big project, okay? And if I go look at that, it basically says, I want you to create a task called new lead if this rule executes. So I'll go look at the rule. I'll click edit. And it basically says, if on your project budget it's greater than 49,000, create a big project task. Go do it. So again, it's creating things, and there's lots of things you can do with rules. You can send emails, you can call APIs, you can create other objects, you can integrate with third-party systems. In my case, I did something pretty simple on Salesforce and created a task. And then finally, if I want to look at my data, so I've got obviously a very simple schema, but let's imagine you have something complex. So you said, hey, I'm gonna build an app for employees to request time off, and I've got a lot of tables and integration. They also have a schema builder that basically gives you a nice user interface to actually view how everything's connected. And in addition, this can also show you a lot of the existing Salesforce stuff you may already have. And from my team's perspective, they'd actually say this is great because a lot of times clients have very complicated Salesforce structures and relationships that are very hard to follow, and this lets you visualize it all. So that's the Salesforce side. So let's go have a look at the app side. And I'm going to turn on mirroring now because there's no way I'll be working on this. I can't read that from here. Let's read it from there. All right, so now let's have a look at Xamarin. So basically what this project has to do, it has to authenticate to Salesforce, right? It's got to retrieve data about all the targets I had. It's got to retrieve all the dependencies, which are the projects that are related to that. If I change them in the app, it's got to update Salesforce, and if I create a new one, it's got to add it to Salesforce, right? So in a traditional model, we've all done it, we all do it all day. You'd have to write a set of REST-based web services, you'd have a database backend, you'd have an authentication platform, and you pull it all together. Not rocket science, but it's not exactly exciting. And it's stuff that we do day in and day out, and there are platforms that speed it up, but you've still got to host it, you've got to put it somewhere, even, unless you buy another platform as a service, you've got work to do. So what we're going to show is how that is actually a very easy task. So I have a class here, I've called it Salesforce Proxy. So this is my class that's basically doing all the stuff with Salesforce. And again, just for example, it's a little dirty from a coding perspective, but it kind of shows you how simple things are. So the first thing I'm going to do is authenticate. So I create an authentication client that is part of the Salesforce REST API. I basically say, authenticate me with my password, and I'm done. I'm authenticated. I now have the ability to create an object called a force client. A force client is basically the wrapper that lets you do everything else, querying, saving, updating, calling web services, whatever it is you want to do. So I've created one, I'm going to store it on a model, and now I'm good to go. So the next thing I wanted to do in the app, so if we go back and look at the app, which I will close now since I've killed one of my buttons. So this list here came from Salesforce, right? So I need to get all these. These are called targets, so how do I get them all? So I created a query. So for those who are link fans, this basically is an asynchronous query to say, go get all these properties from the Bluetube target C, which is, as a company, whenever you create custom objects, it prefaces all the names with your company name. And basically, so this is a target object. So it's the object that I want to read. So if we go look at that object, it's a pretty simple object, right? It's got a picture. It's got a project with a name. It's got a budget, which it exposes through the project. So that's all pretty simple. So that if anybody's, has anybody here done Salesforce development before, integrated with Salesforce at all? So typically it's not that easy, right? Yeah. So we have apps that we built prior to this interface that getting stuff out of Salesforce, serializing it into an object, doing your stuff, and sending it back is hundreds of lines of code, whereas now we're talking one. One of the beauties it does, and one thing I want to point out, you see one of the parameters here is target. That's my object, and Salesforce is automatically mapping everything it read, or the API is mapping everything it read to my object with me not having to write any marshalling code or mapping code. It's just picking it up and putting it in there. So this is things we're used to in other platforms, but not necessarily something we got from Salesforce. So one of the things it doesn't yet do is dependent objects. So I'm stepping through the list, and I'm going to get all the projects that are related to this. So that's kind of how I get it all. So the next thing is, okay, so I go in, and I've decided that Terry's budget isn't really that big. So she got $1,500 instead. Okay, so I've gone in. That basically says I've got to update it, right? So update, again, all we have to do is we say update async. We give the object we're trying to update the instance of the object and the ID, and we're done. It's updated. It's done in Salesforce. And then finally, our create. So we want to create an object. Again, we just pass in the object type and then our instance, and it returns the ID from Salesforce immediately if it's created. And you could see the performance. I'm in a sandbox. It's somewhere around 50 to 100 milliseconds is what it's taking to call this. So very, very, very highly performant. Okay. And I'll try not to delete code while I'm in here. Okay. So let's have a look where we are. So that kind of shows you, how we set stuff up and created things. So next thing is we want to make a change, right? So let's imagine this was more of a traditional project and we want to make a change. We would have to go into our database and add like a new field. We'd have to go to our web services and maybe adjust them unless we'd done some magics, of our own that interrogated the database and dynamically added things. And then we have to change our app and do all that work, right? So it's not like rocket science, but it's not the most fun work, and it's something that happens a lot. You have to add things. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a notes field, basically, to here, so that we can collect notes and see what happens. So we'll go back to Salesforce first of all, and we want to go add a notes field. And they always say don't change code live or work with animals, but I'm going to try it. So we'll go to our object, we will go to our project, and we're going to edit it. Okay. Actually, no we're not. We're going to go to the field section and create a new one. So we're going to create a new field, okay, and it asks what kind of field it is. So I'm just going to create it as text. Maybe I'll create text area, okay. And we're going to call it notes. So this is a place to take notes about our project. And it's going to ask me all the security stuff, so who's allowed. So again, like I said, the security is crazy granular. I'm just going to take the defaults. And it's basically saying, are we good to go? So I'll say save. So I've created a notes field, so let's go back to our objects. We'll go back to project. And we've basically got a notes field, as we can see. And the thing that we're really interested in is the API name, right? We need the API name so we can use it. So let's basically copy that name, and we'll go to our code. And so now we said, okay, so I need to read it so I can display it, right? I need to bind it to my view so I can see it. And then when I save it back, I got to put it back into Salesforce. Okay. So first things first, we'll go to our query, and we'll say get project for target. So what did I add it to? And I haven't rehearsed this. So we added it to our project object. So let's go into our project. And we'll create a new property for this. And one of the things that they don't have yet in the APIs is basically if you have to declare your properties the same as Salesforce sees them. There's no attribute manipulation that says, hey, Salesforce calls it A, and you want to call it B. That's not in the attribute framework, but it's open source, so it's going to be something that we're either going to add or somebody's going to have pretty quick. So just for the demo, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to use the actual name Salesforce calls it, just to keep it simple for now. So I've added it to my object. I now need to go add it to my query. So let's go back to proxy. Bring that up. Okay, so for the, let's go find our project. So I want to select that field as well. Okay, so I've selected it, it's good. Now I need to display it, right? So we're going to go to our view. So let's go down to our view. And we're going to add a new field. So let's go in and we'll call this entry X name. Let's call it notes entry. And we'll give it a placeholder of notes about the project. Okay, and now we just need to bind it. So we're going to say this guy, oops. And as you guys who are doing Xamarin Farms will know, the code completion decides to disappear every so often. So I will take a copy of this, and we'll change the instance variable to notes entry. And since I used the data type, let me go back to my project and copy that one more time. And we'll go paste it here, just for now. For all the others, I created a helper method that just hides it from you. Okay. So we've updated our query, we've added it to the property, and we've bound to it. Let's see if I broke something. So we will build, and it looks like I did. So notes. So I just got type is what we're saying. Let me change it. Okay, so it seemed to have run, so let's see what happens. So up it comes. We've got notes about the project, right? So it seems to be there, but I haven't implemented saving yet. So first thing I'm going to do is, why don't I stick something in Salesforce and see if it comes through, right? Just so I can see if that part works. So we'll jump back to Salesforce. We'll go to our projects. And we will go to the Account Discovery app. And we'll look down here. And I'm going to add some notes. This lady was nice enough to volunteer. And we'll save it. Okay, so now let's quit our app, since I haven't done pull down to refresh. Go run it again. Fingers crossed, right? Okay, so let's look at Terry. And let's see, we didn't get it. So now we got to figure out why, right? Let's go back. So the placeholder, the notes entry, go in here. It's binding the text property. And did you see the bug in my code? Get project for a target. Bluetooth Notes C. So I'm selecting it. All looks good. Brought back the project. Don't know what I'm doing wrong. All right, let's try something. We'll stick a breakpoint in, see what happens. It could all be very bad from here. Okay. So let's see which project we're looking at here. We'll put a breakpoint here instead. Okay, so our project is, oops. So this is all the data that came back from Salesforce, right? So we're looking in here and looking who it is. So that it's not it. We get records back. Okay. I'm going to go on and do the save. Come back to this. Turn all this off. Okay. All right, so let's do the save instead and see, and then we'll figure out what I did wrong since we're getting close on time here. So on the save, when we update, we want to take that same value and send it back to Salesforce. So we're going to update the target, or we're going to create the project. So here's the project. That's all good. Update the project. So I really don't have anything to do if it's populated on the object. So the things I've got to check is, did I actually get it on the object? So let's try that. So if we go back here, go Terry, this is our note, hit save, and let's see. So neither of them are working. So now I've got to figure out what I'm doing. So down here in the logger, Bluetube Notes C property not found on evolve false target. So basically I'm trying to do it on the target, right, instead of the project is what I've goofed up on. So it's me, not Salesforce. So I'm going to go back up and say, not found in evolve. There we go. Okay. So where's my binding? See if that works. Go back to our project one last time just to double check. Okay. Okay, so it's in Salesforce. So obviously I don't know where I'm supposed to put it is the problem, and not Salesforce. So let's see if it updates. So let's go Mr. Cookie Monster. He wants a dieting application. He's got $90,000 to spend, which is a pretty good budget. And we'll say, let's say chocolate. Just put that in. We'll see. Okay, chocolate's my favorite. So let's go see if it went into Salesforce. Let's go back up here. And we'll go to projects. And Cookie Monster had a diet app. And chocolate is my favorite. So apart from my goof up with my typing, it was relatively easy to get stuff in and out of Salesforce, right? Okay. So we added a new field. We added it to the app. Obviously, it's a pretty trivial demo, and we went through it. So basically, to summarize, I think I'm coming up on time. So that was kind of a very quick intro to Salesforce1, the Xamarin integration, and making changes on the fly. So let's look at a couple of things for the programmers in the room that might want to see, some of the nuances that you have to deal with and you have to learn. So one of the things, a lot of time on objects, you don't want certain parameters of your objects going to Salesforce when you're trying to save or coming back from Salesforce. So they've implemented attributes. So as you can see here, I've made this field. I've said it's not updatable and it's not creatable. So the API looks at it and says, okay, I won't send it. And that kind of solves things. They need some more to map parameters, but that one's pretty easy. And then, like I said, the binding's automatic. They also support dynamic. So if you're testing something out and you just want to play with it and you don't want to create objects, you can actually just use the dynamic property and it'll dynamically create you an object with all the properties and go do that. So that's a good way to like prototype and see what's going on before you commit to building a lot of objects, stuff like that. Final thing I'll show you is the relationship building. So we're not going to hook it up to the code right now. But so you say, okay, well, I need more relationships. You know, I need another object, another dependency. So let's imagine we go in and say, for this project, right, I've decided I need a project team. So I can create another object on the fly. So I'll go in here and say, here's an object, create a new one, and I'll say this is a team. The plural of that is teams. There's the object name. This will be the team that will implement this project. Okay. I just want to layer reports, don't want to do much else. I'll save it. Okay, I could add a field on here. So we'll say we'll add a new field and we'll give it text. And we'll say basically, let's say a project summary. And this is where we'll describe the team. Oops, I'll call it team summary, sorry. Describe the team. And we'll check my spelling later. Oh yeah, let's do 128. Okay, so basically we've created our object. Now we want to relate it back to the project, right? So let's go to our team object. Oops, save that. So now I want to create a foreign key relationship back to it. So I just go in basically here. I'll say new. I'll say master detail relationship. Next. I'll say I want it related to a project. Click next. Field name. So this is the project, the project that this team is related to. Okay, so I've done all that. So now I want to say, well, let me take a quick look, see if I did anything goofy. So I go in here, and I'm going to go pick my team, and I drag it down. I've got the relationships. So would you agree that's pretty fast, pretty easy to create those relationships? You can do many-to-many, you can do pick lists, you can do referential pick lists, you can do all that stuff. So I've kind of just touched the surface of Salesforce 1. And you know what you can do with it. What I'm doing is a very, very small part. Apex is its own subject. Pluralsight basically has a whole course on Apex programming, which is, again, is their object-oriented program if you want to do fancier stuff in the back end. You saw me create a workflow item. You can create approval items. You can create triggers. One of the great things about workflow, so you know, all of us have other systems out there. Let's imagine you build this platform and you say, based on a result of what I just did, I need some data sent to another platform, and you might start saying, oh, I've got to go write some Apex code. Well, you can say, based on something happening, call a web service and send it data, and you paste in your URL to your web service, and it will send you data when a specific criteria happens. So for example, let's imagine we were talking about the vacation request system, and you said, hey, I need to add it to Outlook or something, right? And let's imagine Salesforce didn't provide that. You can set up a trigger and say, when a new vacation request is approved, call a web service that we own, and it'll add it to our calendars. So basically declaring things, drag and drop things, and doing the mundane stuff that we really don't need to be writing code for is a summary of what Salesforce 1 provides. On top of that, they have an app exchange, which has tons of apps, as you saw in the video, and they also have lots of components. So a lot of the things we might need, like Dropbox integration or third parties similar to the Xamarin platform, they also provide. And then a lot of it is around data and manipulation of complex data types. So if you guys are in this business and looking at it, I would recommend you go look at the app exchange, because they've got tons of stuff out there, both free and commercial, that could save you thousands of hours of work on applications. So that kind of concludes the talk. Does anybody have any questions? She's just going to bring you a mic so we can hear you.
So I do a fair bit of like bulk data transactions for ETL processing for somebody, and I'm using the Apex data loader, and I find that there's a lot of like plumbing that I have to deal with. And I saw that plumbing looked significantly decreased in this compared to what I am doing now.
Right.
Do you know what the performance is for bulk transactions as opposed to singles?
So I think singles, they say, is when you're using Salesforce, their statistics are something like less than 50,000 transactions over a period of time, and the bulk API is a lot higher than that. And I think what you're doing with the bulk API is probably the correct use of how much volume are you putting in? A lot?
Yeah, I've helped them to optimize to reduce a lot of the like non-effectual changes that were coming through, because they were just saying like all of this updated, but
Right.
most of it in most cases weren't actually changes. It was just the same thing being written back in again over the top of the thing that was there.
Right.
And so actually just removing most of those actually reduced a lot of the overhead.
Right.
So it's possible, depending on how tight you could get that change, you might be able to, I guess, maybe to look at the signals. But I think we were doing somewhere in the neighborhood of sometimes 50 or 100,000 records in a batch.
Right.
And the batch would typically run a couple times a day. And then they might have, I don't know, like 30, 40 jobs like this that would run.
So their guidance basically was less than 50,000 transactions, like I think it was per minute or something like that in the standard API. Okay. So I think in the volume, so if you're talking about millions and millions of records, I don't think it's a good fit, and you stick with the bulk API. But in your case, I think it's probably worth investigating.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Over here. Should bring your mic over.
So any limitation using the Xamarin Salesforce component compared with the native SDK they provide?
Yeah, so the component that I'm using is actually pretty new. I'm not using the Xamarin one. So the original Xamarin one hasn't been updated to new APIs. There is a new Xamarin one that one of our guys, Jonathan, just found and had a look at that's out there. The version that I have is basically Salesforce, the .NET portable class library that they provide. If you go to NuGet, it's the developer force is the one I'm using. It provides queries and updates and continuous queries. So you can basically say, give me the first 1,000 rows, and then give me the next 1,000 rows, and then give me the next. Does all that. But you can't directly call Salesforce API, all the Salesforce APIs with it. You can do object creation and description. But it's probably somewhere in the region of 40% is what they've implemented. But in terms of like day-to-day apps and the kind of stuff you're doing, it may not be a burden. I mean, we haven't found it a burden. I know one thing they have missing that we built was a large object serialization. So one of our apps, the one I was plugging earlier, actually or another app like it, uploads very large PDF files to Salesforce. And the default API tries to do it in memory, and it causes iPads to crash if your PDF's over about 8 megs. So we wrote, he wrote, a serialization API that basically bypasses that. So it allows us to put big files in. So when you've got those nuances or kind of outside of the norm, it's not there yet. But like I said, it's NuGet, it's open source, and they're looking for the community to support it.
So basically you can always bypass it if the library they provide doesn't support anything, so you can bypass and fall back to the RESTful API they provide.
Yeah, and this is REST under the covers, so what they've done is they've created portable class library methods that talk to the REST services. They just haven't implemented all of them, so it's the same. You can use the same authentication token, you can use the same everything, and just go under the covers and do what you need to do. Any other questions? We good? Well, thanks everybody for coming.